death, there are no accidents.
Long ago in a distant time. Okay, 2002. My friends and I were at a local movie theater settling in to watch a little movie you might have heard of called The Two Towers. Waiting through 20 or more minutes of trailers for your movie is hard enough, but when you're waiting to get to part 2 of Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings, it's excruciating. After languishing in trailers for destined classics like Dumb and Dumber, I could not wait for the movie to start. But being a big horror fan, one trailer did catch my eye. One involving a certain log truck. A trailer for a movie about a group of people who somehow cheat death, and now death is coming after them to set its original plan right. And it was a sequel, Final Destination 2. Somehow I had missed the first one a couple years earlier in 2000. Maybe I saw the poster and thought it was Scream and figured I'd already seen it. That or The Faculty, or I Know What You Did Last Summer, or Urban Legends Final Cut, or Final Stab, or Soul Survivors, or Ripper, or The Clown at Midnight, or The Pool, or Phantoms, or...
Word, bitch. Phantom's like a motherfucker.
After The Two Towers blew our minds, my friends and I tracked down the original Final Destination at the rental store and enjoyed the hell out of it. What a great idea for a scary movie, turning the slasher villain into death itself, with Rube Goldberg-like kill scenes. The possibilities were endless for creative on-screen deaths.
Just stay still, okay?
Over the years, I've enjoyed heading back to the theater every now and then to watch what they can come up with next. Both the good and the bad. With Final Destination Bloodlines out now too, I've decided to re-examine the series to refresh. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and comment letting me know your favorite death in the Final Destination series. And be sure to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one. Join me now and we'll revisit fearsome plane crashes, horrifying car wrecks, terrifying roller coasters, frightful raceways, and deadly collapsing bridges. I'm running low on adjectives. Our story starts with Jeffrey Riddick, a writer in Hollywood working for New Line Cinema. Riddick came up with the idea for Final Destination while he was writing a spec script for the television series The X-Files in order to get a TV agent. He'd heard a story about a woman on vacation whose mother called and told her not to take the flight home because she had a bad feeling about it. The woman switched flights and the plane she would have been on crashed. Riddick found the story creepy and wondered, what if that woman was supposed to die on that flight? Using this idea, he wrote a treatment and got an agent. But instead of giving the idea to the X-Files, he decided to write it as a feature film. New Line Cinema bought Riddick's treatment and hired him to write a draft right away. Riddick wrote a story about a teenager who cheats death after having a premonition of his plane exploding. He convinces several of his classmates to leave the plane with him and they survive when the plane does really explode. But soon after, death itself begins taking their lives in gruesome ways one by one. After the script was finished, New Line set their sights on a director, eventually landing on the writing team of James Wong and Glenn Morgan. Wong and Morgan were excited about the idea, and wanted to do for traveling in airplanes what Jaws did for sharks and swimming. When it came to casting Final Destination, the directors were looking for actors who could play well with subtleties. The little things that a character doesn't say or do that create the edge. The things that get under your skin and creep you out. Riddick originally wrote the characters as adults, but New Line had him change them to teenagers, hoping to piggyback off the success of Scream. For the lead character Alex Browning, Riddick originally envisioned someone like Tobey Maguire for the role, but it eventually went to Canadian actor Devon Sawa. The directors hired Sawa after being impressed by his performance in the 1999 horror comedy Idle Hands.
The killer was wearing your shirt. I was wearing me.
For the other lead role of Clear Rivers, producers wanted someone like Kirsten Dunst or Jessica Biel for the role before it eventually went to Ali Larter, who had starred in the recently successful Varsity Blues.
I usually fall for the whipped cream bikini every time.
Rounding out the supporting cast was Seann William Scott, famous for his role as Steve Stifler in American Pie, Dawson's Creek star Kerr Smith, Amanda Detmer, Chad Donella, and Kristen Cloak, who just happened to be the director's wife. Candyman himself, Tony Todd, was also cast as William Bloodworth, the eldritch mortician who has an expert knowledge of death and its rules.
It's all part of death's sadistic design, leading to the grave.
Filming for the plane scene in Final Destination took place on Long Island, New York, with additional scenes being shot in San Francisco, California, and Victoria and Toronto and Vancouver, Canada, where Vancouver International Airport stood in for JFK International Airport. The plane crash was created in a large soundstage on a 3-ton hydraulic gimbal operated automatically to create pitching movements of up to 45 degrees side to side and 60 degrees front to back. This allowed the filmmakers to convey the airplane's engine failure and crash as realistically as they wanted. For the scene where Carter's car is smashed by a train, a replica of a car was made and severed in half prior to filmmaking. In order to ensure the safety of the actors, they had to make sure that there was no real sheet metal in the car. And for the death scenes, the crew used several life casts of the actors and chocolate syrup for fake blood. This movie is so cool. The concept of people avoiding their demise only for death to come collecting later is such a good idea. I'm glad it didn't get stuck as an X-Files episode. It's definitely a very creepy movie. It's a morbid tale of ominous mystery and death surrounding every corner. There's lots of foreboding dialogue in the beginning to set the scene.
Death is not the end.
Alex's dad even makes the quote, "You've got your whole life ahead of you," sound ominous.
Live it up, Alex. You got your whole life ahead of you.
I really love this era of scary movies in the 90s. Movies like Scream, H20, Idle Hands, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Bride of Chucky, The Faculty, Showgirls. Good teen slashers with American Pie dialogue. Something you can rent with your friends over the weekend and have a good time. The cast is very 90s. I've always liked Devon Sawa, ever since Idle Hands. If I see him in the cast list, I know he's going to make something a little better. I loved watching him in the Chucky TV series too. There's always been something familiar about him. Like you know a kid from your class just like him or something. I know girls who still talk about his role as Casper to this very day. The movie also gave us both a young Ali Larter and Seann William Scott, who seems retroactively miscast after getting to know him as Steve Stifler.
How about you guys actually locate your dicks, remove the shrink wrap, and fucking use them?
Tony Todd, Candyman himself, is also great, even if I'm not sure exactly what his character's purpose is in this movie. Obviously, he's there to lay down some exposition and an otherwise unexplained plot, but he's not given a lot of background. I wouldn't change a thing, though.
I'll see you soon.
A little known fact about this movie is that the writers named most of the characters after horror icons. Billy Hitchcock is named after Alfred Hitchcock, who directed horror classics like Psycho and Rear Window. Alex Browning was named after Todd Browning, who directed Dracula and Freaks. Blake Dreyer is named after Carl Theodore Dreyer, who directed Vampire. Terry Chaney is named after Lon Chaney, who starred in horror movies like The Hunchback of Notre Dame and The Phantom of the Opera. Valerie Luton is named after Val Luton, who was an RKO producer who produced Cat People and The Body Snatcher. Larry Murnau is named after F.W. Murnau, who directed the original Nosferatu. Agent Schreck is based on Max Schreck, who starred in Nosferatu. Agent Ween was named after Robert Ween, who directed The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. And Todd and George Wagner are named after George Wagner, who directed the original version of The Wolfman. To go one step further, the character named Todd Wagner is also intentionally spelled with one D, since the word Tod translates to death in German. Naming horror characters after other horror characters is kind of a common horror thing to do, actually. Final Destination may not be the best horror series ever made, I mean what slasher is, but it's incredibly fun. We go to the movies to see Jason and Freddy chop people up in increasingly horrible ways, sure, but more so with this series. It's literally the point. Death feels like its own character in these movies. Even if you can't see it, it feels like it's there. And death is obdurate. The movie still got you looking over your shoulder like after watching a regular slasher. Each movie has us on the edge of our seats and we can't wait to see what will happen to the characters next. I'll think of this movie literally every time I ride a plane. Every time. It made me want to death-proof my house, making it nice and neat with nothing to trip over for weeks. There are some quick deaths, but it sometimes keeps you guessing. Watching the smallest thing turn into the biggest thing is so fun. It's like watching a Rube Goldberg machine, guessing as to what's going to happen next. Watching the drip turn into a puddle, and then you're so sure Todd's going to slice his throat open with the razor, or slip and stab his brains with the scissors, or electrocute himself. The death that happens is never the one you see coming and is almost always worse than dying in the plane crash. All to have death cover its tracks when it's all over. The airplane crash is also the fucking coolest. It's legitimately scary, especially when you're a kid. Seeing people getting sucked out of the plane still trapped to their chairs sure sticks with you. When the plane explodes, breaking the terminal windows and everyone, including the audience, realizes that Alex was right, it gets real. And watching the characters figure out what's going on as the plot plays out is fun. Realizing that the order they died in his premonition is the order they're still dying.
Die in the order they would have died. That's death's design.
One thing that kind of bothers me about this movie, though, is how the main characters Alex and Claire are suddenly dating halfway through the movie. There's one flirty scene where she's showing him her artwork and she tells him this is how you make me feel or whatever, but that's it. There's no hand-holding or kissing or anything else to hint at it, and suddenly she's calling him baby at the scene with the train like they've been dating for weeks.
You know? Baby, you're losing it, okay? The police will be here. Come on, baby. Come on.
Apparently, an original ending explains things. In the original cut, Alex and Claire have a more romantic relationship. There's an extended scene on the beach where Alex and Claire have a more intimate moment, followed by a deleted scene where Claire finds out she's pregnant, and then the movie plays out with Alex dying when he sacrifices himself to save Claire and their unborn baby. The movie concludes with Claire and Carter visiting the Flight 180 memorial with Claire holding her son, who shares Alex's name. This ending gave a more positive message, that death is just a part of life, and that we should live life to its fullest. This ending was changed after test screening audiences wanted Alex to stay alive and to make room for sequels, and the theme of New Life Beats Death was saved for Final Destination 2. In the ending that ended up in the final cut, Alex figures out he can cheat death by saving whoever's supposed to die next in the new order that they're now supposed to die, effectively skipping over them and foiling death's plan. He saves Claire this way when he finds her trapped in her car, surrounded by loose electrical cables and a lit gasoline tank. He grabs the cables, giving her a moment to escape before her car explodes. Then she revives him, stopping death's plan completely. 6 months later, though, he realizes that he mixed up the order they died in his premonition and is wrong about death skipping over him. Carter saves him from dying, but Alex says he wasn't next in the sequence, with a giant sign crushing Carter at the last second. This ending showed that there's no real way to beat death. It can be postponed for a short while, but it can't be fully stopped. A rule that would stick around for the entire series.
So who's next?
Final Destination premiered in the US and Canada on March 17, 2000, earning just over $10 million. It placed at number 3 behind Erin Brockovich and Mission to Mars. When all was said and done, it made $53.3 million domestically with $59.9 million in other territories for a worldwide total of $112.8 million against its $23 million budget. Reviews for the film were mixed, with some critics complaining that the movie had a poor execution, was unsophisticated, crude, and dramatically flat. Though some critics were more kind to the movie, praising the premise, finding it intriguing, thrilling, entertaining, and suspenseful. Praising Glenn Morgan and James Wong's directing, and Devon Sawa and Ali Larter's performances. And while the movie was a hit or miss with the critics, horror fans were blown away, with the movie becoming an instant classic. And what happens with successful movies? They get sequels. After the success of Final Destination, New Line Cinema approached original writer Jeffrey Riddick for a sequel. Riddick said yes, eager to expand on the mythology of the movie and not just tell the same story over again. Unfortunately, original directors James Wan and Glenn Morgan were not able to return due to being busy on the production of their own respective movies, The One and the remake of Willard. So New Line hired second unit and stunt coordinator David R. Ellis as director and writing partners Eric Bress and J. Mackie Gruber as co-writers. Ellis felt right at home directing, since he felt working second unit was just an extension of directing and he was used to doing big action scenes anyway. He aimed to make a sequel that would fit with the original, but could also stand on its own without it, taking what worked and improving on it. The lead from the first movie, Devon Sawa, would not return for the sequel. There were rumors that Sawa didn't return due to a salary dispute with New Line, or that it simply didn't work out with his schedule, but producers have stated that it had everything to do with the narrative of the movie and nothing to do with money or any unwillingness to come back. Despite this, New Line asked Ali Larter to reprise her role as Clear Rivers, and also had Tony Todd resume his character of William Bloodworth. For the film's new lead, the Virgin Suicide actress A.J. Cook was cast as Kimberly Corman with Michael Landis, Terrence C. Carson, Jonathan Cherry, Keegan Connor Tracy, Linda Boyd, James Kirk, David Paetchio, Justina Machado, and Noel Fisher rounding up the doomed cast members. Since the production team had such a positive experience there and knew the area so well, and not to mention tax cuts for shooting, Final Destination 2 was shot in and around Vancouver Island in 2002. British Columbia Highway 19 was used as Route 23, the Plaza of Nations stood in for Ellis Medical Complex, and the farm and lake scenes were filmed in Campbell River and Okanagan Lake, depicting Greenwood Lake, New York. Just like how I think of the first movie every time I ride an airplane, I always think of this one when I'm unfortunately stuck behind a log truck on the freeway. In fact, I'm pretty sure this caused a whole generation to avoid them. I'm sure you've seen the memes. The series even used this particular gag in advertisements for Part 6, Final Destination Bloodlines. Once again, the movie presents a lot of clues to what's about to happen, and they're better than last time because you really know what's coming, building the anticipation. Ranging from funny and subtle with the high school football team yelling, to hearing AC/DC's Highway to Hell on the radio, to the not-so-subtle. And the ensuing pileup is even more impressive than the plane crash, and equally unforgettable. It lasts about the same amount of time as the plane crash did, with both of them clocking in at about 2 to 2.5 minutes, but it's a lot more detailed and we get to see what happens to a number of people involved in the wreck. In the original, Alex and his classmates all get kind of lumped together in the crash. We saw some people get sucked out of the plane and saw them all get burnt to a crisp, scary in itself for sure, but Part 2 has every character's particular death. We've got the cop with arguably the most memorable death in the series, the stuck-up business bitch who crashes her SUV into one of the fallen logs, the mother and son whose brakes get stuck on some fallen water bottles who also crash into the logs, the meathead who burns alive stuck in his car by his seatbelt, the motorcyclist who gets smashed by his own bike, the stoner guy who gets slammed by a garbage truck, and finally we've got the main character Kimberly, who flips her truck and is eventually smashed by a flaming car carrier truck. The first movie had some great deaths after its initial premonition disaster, but it didn't get as creative as this one. There are a couple chain reaction style deaths like Todd in the bathroom and the teacher in her kitchen, but everything else is pretty quick, like the speeding bus, flying train shrapnel, or a falling billboard. In this sequel, they beefed up everything that was cool about the first one, and for the most part, the deaths are more of the Rube Goldberg type. This time, we're done worrying for the characters, and now we're just here to see what happens to the new ones. We're back for round 2, and the filmmakers know it. So they give it to us. They play on our expectations, teasing us by having characters in precarious situations before they actually die. Like Evan navigating a toy-filled hallway carrying a bunch of stuff, or Tim at the dentist being afraid of being poked by some equipment but eventually dying to something completely different. And it seems like they had a little more fun this time around planning the deaths. The movie's a little more humorous with stuff like a plastic fish dropping from a mobile to choke Tim, or like when Evan throws out some old spaghetti before his death scene begins, only to barely escape it, and then slip on the spaghetti and die at the last second. And it's fun to watch on a second viewing. Seeing all the signs that you might have missed before, like not knowing the spaghetti would come back and seeing the crane holding the glass plane that eventually flattens Tim. and the death scenes are exceptional. I especially like the news van exploding and sending a barbed wire fence flying through Rory, splitting him into 3, technically 5 parts. The idea of death coming back to finish the job is still cool and fresh at this point, and the movie doesn't suffer much from not having a major antagonist like Freddy, Michael, or Jason. The locking doors from part 1 and closing windows in this one are evident of death being a present threat. The characters all might be a little stock, but they are good, likable characters for the most part. Just like part 1, there's characters named after horror icons, but there's only a few this time. Kimberly Corman and Tim and Nora Carpenter are named after famous horror directors Roger Corman and John Carpenter, respectively. And having Clear Rivers back is a good move. It offers up some legitimacy as a sequel, having her connect the 2 movies. And since this is part 2, Claire can just tell the characters what happened last time so they don't have to figure it out for themselves. Stuff like dying in the order that they originally died. It sucks she doesn't make it out of this one, though. It's also too bad that Alex couldn't come back along with Clear, and the writers got rid of him in the dumbest way. It's confirmed in the movie that Alex died from a brick falling on his head. Who knows, maybe that was the point, to be non-epic and we just missed the elaborate Goldberg setup because it's supposed to infer that it happened off-screen. Just a little underwhelming for the hero from the last film. Tony Todd is also back and awesome as always, being less ambiguous this time around, giving them a clear goal by bringing back the only new life can defeat death thing from the original ending of part 1.
Force death to start anew.
Though they ditch this thing pretty quickly and then go right back to the ending from the first one with new life, meaning bringing someone back to life. Like when Alex sacrifices himself for Claire only to be brought back to life, Kimberly sacrifices herself by drowning herself in an ambulance submerged underwater. For some reason, this sacrifice makes them the only true survivors of the whole series. And I say that because every other time someone tries it in any other of these movies, it doesn't work. Who knows? The movie almost gets a little too up its own ass with the rules and stuff, but it's mostly a great time, with the filmmakers tightening everything up from the first movie and having fun with it. Final Destination 2 premiered in the US and Canada on January 31st, 2003, earning over $16 million in its opening weekend, placing at number 2 behind The Recruit. It would eventually gross $90.9 million worldwide on a budget of $26 million. Critics were not very kind to the Final Destination sequel, criticizing it for having a bad plot, bad acting, and bad writing. They called it silly, illogical, a disgusting waste of artistic integrity, and said it was too far-fetched to really work, and just an excuse for elaborate gory scenes. Though some liked that it walked the line between horror and humor, calling it simple yet effective for having a fun time. Horror fans love it though, and over time it's become considered one of, if not the best installment of the franchise.
You have to follow the signs, Kimberly.
How do you know my name?
The third Final Destination movie was originally intended as the last part of a trilogy and had been in development since the release of Final Destination 2. It was originally going to be called Cheating Death, Final Destination 3, before the main title was dropped. Franchise creator and writer Jeffrey Reddick did not return, but Glenn Morgan and James Wong, the co-writers of the original movie, returned, with Wong stepping in as director. Unlike the previous movie, which was a continuation of the original, producers of the third installment wanted it to be a standalone sequel featuring new characters. They wanted to portray the idea that cheating death after it tries to visit you could happen to anyone. With new characters, they could easily start fresh with a new plot and have these new characters be unaware of what was happening and react accordingly. There was a rumor that a fatal derailment on the Big Thunder Mountain Railroad at Disneyland was the inspiration for using a roller coaster as the opening scene disaster, but Wong eventually shot this down. He and Morgan stated that loss of control is a major theme in the movie that they had envisioned from the very beginning, exemplified by both the main character and the roller coaster. Adding that psychologists have confirmed one reason some people are afraid of riding roller coasters is because they have no control over it and what happens to them. The movie really hammers this theme of no control into you.
Kevin can get so out of control. You know, I'm such a control freak, like, I couldn't handle that.
They say the real fear with these rides comes from the feeling of having no control.
Man, please, can you please control that bitch?
I'm usually such a control freak, but I didn't do enough to stop it.
Well, it's nice to see that things haven't made you any less of a control freak.
Your fear is from a sense of having no control.
Willful ignorance is surrendering control.
Okay. We got the idea.
For casting, Wong looked for actors who could portray the characters as heroic individuals with realistic qualities. Actors that had movie star charisma, but also seemed like people you might know in real life. Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who had also auditioned for the second movie, and Ryan Merriman were cast as main characters Wendy Christensen and Kevin Fisher. Morgan and Wong took great care in casting the supporting characters too, whom they considered just as important to the movie as the main characters. This consisted of Chris Limchi, Alex Johnson, Amanda Crew, Jesse Moss, Texas Battle, Sam Easton, Gina Holden, Shalon Simmons, and Crystal Lowe. As with the first two installments, Final Destination 3 was filmed in Vancouver. Filming took 3 months, with the first 2 weeks spent shooting the roller coaster derailment at Vancouver's Playland, with the corkscrew roller coaster standing in for the Devil's Flight coaster in the movie. The actual roller coaster is much tamer and slower, only having a double corkscrew compared to the fictional Devil's Flight, which contains multiple vertical loops and multiple corkscrew sections. CGI and a variety of camera angles were utilized to make the coaster look larger, necessitating 144 visual effects shots, and the cast had to ride the coaster over 25 times for the shoot. Custom-designed coasters were built for the shoot, with several of the cars suspended with bungee cords to film the crash, with the actors filmed in front of a green screen with the CGI background added in. The deaths required the use of CGI on-screen effects, and each actor had a corresponding CGI double.
Keep going until you hear cut.
Wow, this really sucks balls.
This Final Destination is pretty good. It's not as good as 1 or 2, but it's still worth watching. The roller coaster accident is alright too, although I feel like it could have been more detailed like the freeway pileup was. It's mostly people just falling out of the coaster or hanging on for dear life, which really bends that good old suspension of disbelief to its breaking point. And the whole crash really happens because this guy wanted to see some boobies. He attempts to capture the girls in front of him's breasts on camera, but he drops it on the roller coaster's loop, and combined with a leak in the hydraulics and a break in the track, well, you know the rest. And I don't exactly think of this movie every time I ride a roller coaster. And unlike the pileup or airplane crash, isn't there an emergency stop for this kind of thing? Whereas the disasters of 1 and 2 are almost completely unpreventable, it seems like this one is the most unrealistic in terms of whether it could really happen or not. But I'm just nitpicking. That doesn't exactly make it less scary. The movie does a good job of building the dread leading up to the ride. It takes you back to trips to amusement parks and riding your first roller coaster. Once again, the movie pays homage to various horror filmmakers and icons by naming the cast after them. Wendy and Julie Christensen both pay homage to Benjamin Christensen, the director of Haxan in 1922. Jason Wise pays homage to horror film director Robert Wise, who directed the original version of The Haunting. Aaron Ulmer pays homage to director Edgar G. Ulmer, who directed the 1934 horror classic The Black Cat. Louis Romero pays homage to both horror film directors Herschel Gordon Lewis and George A. Romero, who directed Monster A Go-Go and The Night of the Living Dead and its sequels respectively. Carrie Dreyer pays homage to Carl Theodor Dreyer, who directed Vampire in 1932. Ashley Freund pays homage to horror director and cinematographer Carl Freund, who directed movies like The Mummy and shot Dracula and Metropolis. And Ashley Halperin pays homage to director Victor Halperin, who directed White Zombie in 1932. The movie also starts adding series Easter eggs in for fans, like the Heist Pale Ale truck that backs into Kevin's car, which is the same brand of beer also seen in Final Destination 2. The name Heist comes from the stunt coordinator Freddie Heist, who did the stunt work for that movie. Mary Elizabeth Winstead is good as usual, successfully leading the threequel, and as I said, the movie is pretty good, but the series is kind of losing some importance at this point. It's not taking itself as seriously as it did the previous 2 times. There's not a lot of story, and for the most part that's okay, we get the premise at this point, but it's really just starting to become jumping from one death to the other, with some pretty forgettable characters. Especially when certain scenes start to feel repetitive, like the inevitable scenes where they mention this phenomenon has happened before.
A kid had a vision that the plane was going to explode. Just like you did.
No one believing the main characters until it's too late, and the fake-outs not working as much. We're just used to and expecting the series' old tricks. Like when this guy doesn't die from the obvious giant swords that are hanging above his head, but then dies from the weight machine malfunctioning right after the swords miss him.
Baby, I just win!
I'm not exactly complaining, it's still a fun ride, but we see it all coming. And the series has definitely lost its horror factor. It's just not as scary anymore. There is a memorable tanning bed scene where 2 girls are burned to death that has a pretty good Rube Goldberg effect with the shelves locking them both in at the same time. That almost makes you miss the fast deaths as they're boiled alive, but the gratuitous nudity feels like it's just an excuse to see some boobies. More so than most scary teen movies. It does have a great cut after they die though, with their tanning beds matching their caskets. The picture thing where the main cast tries to guess what the next death will be from the pictures they took before the disaster is kind of cool, but when they start noticing clues in pictures of Abraham Lincoln and the 9/11 attacks, it gets a little far-fetched. What the hell are they even trying to get at? And if you think about it too much, it starts to raise more questions. Like if the pictures of them before they got on the coaster of how they die after they ride it, were they supposed to die on the coaster? I mean, yeah, they were supposed to die on the coaster, but why would death bother with the picture game? Also, the characters aren't very good at guessing what the pictures mean. There's a picture of one character holding a fake gun at the other one, but they're all obsessed with the flags in the background. The shape of the flags does come back, but how could they overlook the gun in the middle of the picture? Then the character ends up dying from a nail gun. Tony Todd doesn't return as Bloodworth in this one, but he did lend his voice to the devil outside the entrance to the roller coaster.
You may never return from Devil's Flight. Try not to scream.
He's also the voice on the speaker on the subway at the end.
The next stop is the end of the line.
And at the roller coaster's entrance underneath the devil, you can see a sign reading, "No exit after turnstiles. I'll see you soon." Which of course is one of Bloodworth's best lines.
I'll see you soon.
Once again, the character's efforts to defeat death fail, and in the end we get a second premonition where everyone dies in a subway crash. So 2 for 1, I guess. Final Destination 3 opened on February 10th, 2006 in the US and Canada. It earned $19.1 million on its opening weekend, coming in at second behind the remake of The Pink Panther. It eventually earned $117.7 million worldwide, making it the most financially successful installment in the franchise so far. Critics didn't like this one either, citing the same critiques, complaining that it was more of the same gory pointlessness with nowhere to go. Some complained that it had become formulaic and predictable, and that the scenes in between the characters dying were dull and boring. Some disagreed though, saying that rather than becoming boring, that the formula had become perfected, saying the structure had held up over the trilogy. And fans liked the movie for the most part, praising the humor and elaborate kills. But one thing everyone could agree on was how good Mary Elizabeth Winstead was.
That kind of thing is gonna happen to us the rest of our lives.
After the series' continued success with Final Destination 3, Eric Bress, who wrote The Butterfly Effect and co-wrote Final Destination 2, wrote a script for a new Final Destination movie that impressed Warner Brothers and was greenlit right away. Bress reportedly submitted his draft for the movie at 11:59 p.m., right at the deadline before the writer's strike of 2007 to 2008 began, which could explain a lot about this movie. James Wong originally wanted to return to direct, but had to drop out due to commitments with Dragon Ball Evolution. So studio executives turned to David R. Ellis, who directed Final Destination 2 to direct. Ellis accepted the offer because he was excited about the 3D effects at the time, stating that he wanted to use it to add depth to the movie as opposed to just having something pop out at the audience every 4 minutes. Interestingly, Ellis signing on to direct made this series the only movie series to have 2 directors alternate between the first 4 films, with James Wong directing the first and third movies while Ellis directed the second and fourth. For the cast, we've got Bobby Campo as Nick O'Bannon, Chantal Van Santen as Laurie Milligan, Nick Zano as Hunt Wynorski, Haley Webb as Janet Cunningham, and Benjamin Buford Blue as George Lanter.
People call me Bubba.
Although all the previous Final Destination movies were shot in Vancouver, Ellis convinced producers to shoot in New Orleans to bring business to the city. Filming began in March 2008 and ended in May that same year, with the opening racetrack crash shot at Mobile International Speedway in Irvington, Alabama. Reshoots were also shot at Universal Studios Florida in April 2009. You've heard me complain about this before, but this was the age of movies taking out or adding the in titles or simply just reusing them. But that's this movie's smallest sin.
Drop the. It's clear.
This is the point in the series where the producers cared more about making a cash grab sequel than anything else, which is pretty evident from the get-go, with the movie not having the usual pre-credit sequence and jumping right into the disaster with loud rumbling race cars and a crappy rock score. The movie itself points out that everyone is just here to see people die.
You come here hoping to see a crash?
Of course it's to see a crash.
Then we barely get to know these characters' names before the movie starts getting right into the action with a raceway crash. I mean seriously, besides having boring old names like Bobby, Nick, Janet, and George, half the movie's survivors don't even have names. In the credits, they're simply known as what they are: racist, mechanic, cowboy, and MILF. Yes, really.
MILF! MILF! MILF!
Anyway, the racetrack crash is pretty bad. The graphics have not aged well, really relying on that 3D gimmick that was so popular at the time. This movie came out the same year as the first Avatar that gave 3D its renaissance, and every horror franchise followed suit.
Are you sure you don't want to come to the movie? It's in 3D.
The deaths are so fast and cheap that it really takes you out of the movie, going for shock over horror. They make them so overly gruesome that it winds up having the opposite effect and just reminds you that you're watching the 4th Final Destination movie. After the disaster intro, the movie goes through the usual series beats with the main character remembering all the visual and audio cues leading up to the crash. They see it on the news after, there's a funeral and or memorial, no one believes the premonition thing until someone involved dies, then they have a meeting about it, they try to skip the order, it doesn't work, everyone dies. But the worst part of this movie are the premonition clues that the main character Bobby gets. Instead of clever little moments in the first one, like Alex's fan cutting up a magazine to show that Todd is next in line, the clues come in these really well-made 3D daydreams. These things are honestly offensive. Not only do they look terrible, even for 2009, but it's just lazy writing made to favor the 3D effects over anything else. The writing is bad all around, though.
Look, man, I'm sorry for being blunt, but your life's in danger, and I think you're gonna die.
I know it's a horror series, but you can't just do exposition with having the characters figure out what's going on by having them say stuff like, some say, or other people say.
Some say the chain can be broken, but others say,
somehow Palpatine returned.
The horror factor is just totally gone in this one. After the first 2 movies, you're left thinking about it and nervous that death may be waiting for you around every corner. But after this 3D splatterfest, you're left wishing they just left it as a trilogy. The pacing is wildly fast, the acting is bad, there's no Tony Todd due to scheduling conflicts with Transformers, and the rules of the movie are just whatever they need them to be in order to keep the story going. Some of the deaths are kind of funny, like the unnecessarily racist guy getting hooked by a towing chain and lit on fire while he's dragged down the street, but that's about it. The rest are mostly used for 3D and you just see them coming now. Like when these 2 kids are throwing rocks at a sign with a lawnmower next to it. You just inherently know that lawnmower is going to suck up a rock and it's going to kill someone, which it does. But only after making you wait through a few minutes of obvious fake-outs. It's like the spaghetti gag from part 2, but nowhere near as good. The main characters once again all share last names with horror icons. Nick O'Bannon is named after Dan O'Bannon, who wrote Alien and directed Return of the Living Dead. Janet Cunningham is named after Sean S. Cunningham, who directed the original Friday the 13th. And Laurie Milligan and Hunt Wynorski are named after Andy Milligan and Jim Wynorski, who directed B movies like The Man with Two Heads and Chopping Mall. For the Easter eggs, the raceway disaster happens at McKinley Speedway, which is the name of the town, high school, and character Ian McKinley from Final Destination 3. We've also got the racist character drinking the Heist Pale Ale from Final Destination 2 and 3, and the movie theater they go to near the end of the movie is called Taggart Theaters. Taggart being the name of director David R. Ellis's daughter. And when Janet gives money to the homeless man and his dog, we find out that the dog's name is Browning, which was Alex's last name from the first movie.
Let's see what we got here, Browning.
The movie concludes on a pretty fucking terrible ending with the main character realizing that once again their plan to foil death has failed, and death gets them all when a truck crashes into the cafe they're all at, and the deaths are presented in an X-ray fashion for God knows why. The Final Destination released in 3D and 2D on August 28, 2009. The movie debuted at number 1 in North America, beating Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, earning $28.3 million in its first weekend. It remained at number 1 in North America for 2 weeks, making it the first and only movie in the series to top the box office so far. The movie made a grand total of $178.4 million worldwide on a budget of $40 million, making it the highest grossing movie in the franchise at the time. As expected, critics hated the movie, calling it predictable and disposable horror fare, labeling it as an advertisement for the crappy 3D that was its only barely saving grace. At this point, it seems like the idea of death catching up to people that somehow skip their own deaths is so good and so unique that you can only do it so many times before it just gets cheap. But like death itself, the series had to come back for more. Despite claims by the producers and promotional materials, as well as the film's title, that Part 4 would be the final film in the Final Destination series, a fifth film, Final Destination 5, was released just 2 years later. In March 2010 at Show West, Warner Bros. Announced that Final Destination 5 was in the works. Eric Heiserer, who at the time was known for writing the Nightmare on Elm Street remake and the Thing prequel, was announced as screenwriter in April 2010. In June 2010, New Line Cinema announced that Stephen Quayle, who was the second unit director of Titanic and Avatar, would direct, and that the movie would go by the title Final Destination. Okay. Luckily, they came to their senses and reversed the title back to Final Destination 5 a few months later. Not that that was any better, really. I mean, now we've got Final Destination, which is the first one, The Final Destination, which is Part 4, and Final Destination 5, which is technically a prequel to the first movie. Producers stated that they wanted to return to the darkness of the original Final Destination, as opposed to the almost comedic route that the previous movie took. Heiserer said that he had trouble coming up with good death sequences, saying it was, quote, ridiculously hard to find inspiration, though the death scene involving the LASIK eye surgery came from when his wife underwent the same surgery. Nicholas D'Agosto, Miles Fisher, Emma Bell, Arlen Escarpeta, Ellen Rowe, Courtney B. Vance, Jacqueline Wood, David Koechner, and P.J. Byrne were cast in the movie. Filming returned to Vancouver between September and December 2010 with the Lionsgate Bridge standing in for the North Bay Bridge in New Bay, New York.
3, 2, 1, action!
Now this is what I call a Final Destination sequel. The bridge catastrophe is much better than the raceway. It looks 1,000 times better too, being the longest opening disaster in the series, clocking in at over 4.5 minutes. There are some funny 3D moments, but they're mostly forgivable and it's awesome overall, especially this wide shot at the end of all the cars falling into the water. The bridge disaster was reportedly inspired by the Tacoma Narrows Bridge collapse. On November 7, 1940 at around 9:45 in the morning, strong winds caused the bridge to sway wildly from side to side, tipping a delivery truck over and causing cars on the bridge to lose control before collapsing into the Puget Sound. Production used 2-scale models of the bridge and used green screens, green mats, wires, and digital compositing to bring the collapse to life. And I gotta say, it's such a huge improvement over the last movie in every way. The green screen is actually really impressive for this type of movie, and watching the behind-the-scenes footage comparing what they shot versus how they made it with the green screen is fascinating. The movie goes through the usual paces of the main character seeing the disaster, saving everyone, cops asking him how he knew about it, the funeral, figuring out the order they all died in, but this time around it's made better by the movie chilling the fuck out and actually giving a shit about its story and characters. We actually get to know them and the pacing is much better. Tony Todd also makes his triumphant return to the series, featuring in more than one scene for once.
You all, just be careful now.
The deaths are much better this time too, successfully building the tension and relying on it. The gym scene in particular, where you're just waiting for this girl to step on a screw resting on the balance beam.
I came as soon as I heard.
Ew. And the LASIK surgery scene is good too. You really suffer through it with each character in this one. There's a log truck cameo, along with the name Taggart showing up again, and keeping with the longtime series tradition, several main characters are named after horror icons. Candace Hooper is named after Tobe Hooper, who directed the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1 and 2 and Poltergeist. Peter Friedkin is named after William Friedkin, who directed The Exorcist, and Olivia Castle is named after William Castle, who directed both The Tingler and House on Haunted Hill. We also see Nathan bring in a 6-pack of Heist Pale Ale.
So, who wants one?
The disaster is better, the kills are better, the characters are better, basically everything that sucked about Part 4 is better in this one. The actors are much better too. They even got Tom Cruise to be in it. I mean Adam Scott. I mean Dave Franco.
What's that supposed to mean?
It's like the writer actually took his time and thought about the rules of the movie he could use and applied them perfectly, even adding some of his own. There's a new rule that if you kill someone who wasn't involved in the original disaster, you get their life and death spares you.
And then you take their spot in the realm of the living, all the days and years that they've yet to live.
In the end, we get a sort of Final Destination Inception. A Final Destinception, if you will, where it's revealed that this movie is a prequel to all the others, with the surviving characters of this movie dovetailing into the events of the first film. It turns out that the guy they accidentally killed to get his lifespan had a huge undiagnosed brain aneurysm and was set to die any day, and therefore no one gets his lifespan. Bobby then sees Alex and the rest of the characters from Final Destination 1 get off the plane, later learning that it was because someone said they had a vision that the plane was going to explode. We're then treated to a souped-up version of the plane crash, and the movie ends on a down, but fun note. Then we get a greatest hits of the series deaths for the credits, which is pretty cool. Final Destination 5 opened in 3D at number 3 on August 4th, 2011, with $18.4 million behind Rise of the Planet of the Apes, which had held the top spot for 2 weeks, and The Help. It eventually made $157.8 million on a budget of $40 million, making it the second highest grossing movie in the franchise. Critics were a little kinder to the fifth Final Destination, saying it was still gory, happy fun, but a nice return to form for the franchise. They liked the death scenes, calling them anxiety-filled and inventively grotesque, and they praised the 3D, calling it a massive improvement in the technology from the previous film. They even loved the opening disaster scene, garnering it with praise across the board, saying it was the best opening sequence since the freeway pile-up from Final Destination 2. Which brings us to now. With Final Destination Bloodlines releasing on May 16, 2025 and debuting at over $51 million and finishing first at the box office, marking it the best opening weekend for the franchise, it would appear the series is alive and well. I'll be going into more detail on that installment very soon, but really wanted to highlight the nostalgia of at least the first 3 films in the franchise. It's been 14 years since the previous entry, and that's plenty of time for the series to chill out and come up with some fresh ideas, so I'm excited. These are the movies you would go to with your friends and get rowdy in, yelling in fear and disgust as the kills got more and more brutal. Even if it's not the highest caliber of cinematic quality, it's earned its place in the horror fan psyche as effectively as Psycho did with showers or Jaws did with open water, traumatizing a generation of plane travelers and drivers. I'm not holding my breath for this series to win any awards, but we all keep going back for a reason. Some good old-fashioned fun. Thanks for watching The Lamphouse. If you like this video, or if you're a fan of horror, action, or just movies in general, be sure to check out my other videos at the links in the description or playlists on the channel. Watching another video right after this one also really helps out with the algorithm, so feel free to check them out. And be sure to give this video a like and subscribe if you like what you see. See you soon.